Welcome to the Recovery Effect Podcast with Bill Vineyard. Recovery is Bill's passion and his life's work of 30 plus years. Now it's your turn to experience the Recovery Effect, a powerful mix of recovery, spirituality, philosophy, and most importantly, living life as your true self. Now here's your host, Bill Vineyard.
I have a couple of things I want to talk about before we begin this podcast. One of them is that this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat anyone. It's just my own personal opinion and has nothing to do with diagnosing and treating alcoholics or mental illness. This podcast is primarily, if not totally, directed towards alcoholics and drug addicts. Another thing I like to say that this episode will probably make a few of you mad. Maybe a lot of you. But I'd like to just please ask you to keep an open mind, take what you want, throw the rest in the trash, and I would encourage you to listen to it to the very end. I also will have a part 2 and 3 coming out, and I'd like you to follow up with that to get the whole idea of what's going on here. With that being said, let's get on with the podcast. And if you have any questions at all or have any comments, just go to therecoveryeffect.com and leave them there, and I'll try to get them answered. I had an incident happen to me a week or so ago that reminded me of something that happened to me in the 5th grade. I was sitting at my desk reading, minding my own business, when I felt this tap on the back of my shoulder. As I turned around, this little girl passed me a note and motioned for me to pass it on. When I turned around and got ready to pass that note on, I looked up, and Miss Snyder, my 5th grade teacher, was zoomed straight in at me and that stupid note that was in my hand. She walked over there, snatched the note out of my hand, grabbed my hand, and there we were, off to the principal's office. When we got to the principal's office, the principal said, "I think we need to use the Board of Education on this violation." Now, he didn't mean the Administrative Board of Education. He meant a SWAT paddle. And that's exactly what he did. He gave me 3 swats. After that was completed, I was walking back to class with Miss Snyder when she looked down at me and said, "Billy, you know trouble seems to find you. Out of all the kids in class that passed that note, you're the only one I saw do it." The same thing happened to me about a week ago. My wife and I, we went to our favorite restaurant and ate. Had a great time. It was a sunny day. Everything was beautiful. After we ate, I said, "You know, Jane, there's only one other thing we could do to make this day better, and that would be to go to our favorite bookstore, the 8th Day Books." So we headed down there. I knew all the people that worked there, and I've known the owner for over 25 years. So when I got there, me and Jane walked up to the counter, and they kind of came around, and my priest was even there, and we started talking, and the subject of alcohol and drug treatment came up. The priest asked my wife, Jane, how she felt about it, and she said, "Well, it's a lot harder than it used to be because of this meth epidemic." He asked me if I felt the same way, and I said, "Yeah." And the other major problem is that they're giving these people so much psychotropic medications that they're really never detoxed from everything, and that they're not getting to some of the root problems that they're experiencing. They're just kind of emotionally numbing them out, which makes it really hard to deal with them on an emotional level because they're just numb. I said it was somewhat like the methadone clinics. When the heroin addict goes down and get their methadone, a lot of them, after they leave, go out and buy some heroin. That way, they don't have to pay as much money to reach their desired high. I said it's like giving an alcoholic a half pint of whiskey every day, and so it doesn't take them much of their resources to get drunk. Well, all of a sudden I hear this voice say, "I respectfully disagree with you." I looked over there, and there's this guy sitting in a chair about 3 or 4 foot away from us. He wasn't part of this group. He wasn't in the conversation. And I said, "What'd you say?" And he says, "I respectfully disagree with you." He said, "I work at the methadone clinic, and I find that when it's coupled with cognitive behavioral therapy, it seems to work quite well." Well, obviously, he has a different definition of what works quite well than I have. So I told him, I said, "You know that doesn't work." And he said, "Well, again, I'm going to respectfully disagree with you." I said, well, you can respectfully disagree with me all you want to, but this thing that you're doing absolutely doesn't work, and you know that. Well, it got worse from that point on. I'm just sick and tired of being politically correct and professionally phony, so I just held my ground and stood there, and we just had an argument. Well, I glanced up at my wife and my priest, and I realized that they were nervous and kind of twitching around as I was standing there. It was one of those moments that you could cut the air with a knife. And so I thought I better bring this to a close, so I let it dribble down and walked back over to my circle there and said a few things and finally said, Jane, we ought to leave, and so we left. But I've never been able to get that off my mind, and I'll tell you why. It's because for the 37 years I've been in this alcohol and drug treatment business, I have fought this same battle. You wouldn't think I'd have to, but when you're dealing with people who have no idea what they're doing, you're going to fight this battle generation after generation. They honestly believe that they can get people off of dope by giving them dope. It's not even a logical course of action to take, and the proof of it is that it doesn't work. There's always been animosity and a fight between mental health and the 12-step program. I really haven't figured out what it is. Sometimes I think it's power and ego. Other times I think it's the anti-God versus pro-God. It might be something like science versus theology. And when I really think about it, I think it gets down to the old-fashioned good versus evil. But I can guarantee you one thing. From what I've studied in the history of alcohol and drug addiction, and what I've experienced these past 37 years, mental health and medication never has, it's not now, and it will never work. And they know that. They can present it as a medication. They can present methadone, Suboxone, and all these other psychotropics are given these people and pretend it's medication. But no matter how they dress it up and how pretty they make it, it still doesn't work. There's a number of reasons why alcoholics and drug addicts are flocking to this type of recovery, but the one I think that really stands out the most is everybody, including them, is looking for an easier, softer way. Instead of accepting life on life's terms or trying to find a spiritual solution to life's woes, they'd rather numb out the feelings that they're experiencing or slow down the mind or take something to sleep. All these problems are solvable and have been solvable for years, especially for the alcoholic and drug addict who's working a program. If they came to me today and told me that there's a medication I could take that would allow me to go back to social drinking, but I'd have to give up everything I've gained in the 12-step program in order to do it, I'd absolutely refuse. Because I've gained so much more with this 12-step program than those people could ever give me. What happiness and peace that I found in this miserable and terrifying world, I owe to the 12 steps. I used to say that if my family, my wife, my children, my grandchildren, all went up in an airplane and it crashed, killing them all, that would be the most terrifying and painful thing I could ever go through. But you know what? I would get through it somehow. If I lost a Tishwin, which has been my purpose in life, that would cause a lot of discomfort and a lot of agony, but I'd get through it. I'd get through the other side. If I lost all my money, my home, my car, everything I had, and I was living on the streets, I would be in terrible anguish over that, but I too would get through that. But you know what? If I lose my sobriety, I've lost all that, because everything I have today is because I'm sober. Everything I have today that's worthwhile is contingent on me being sober. And my sobriety is contingent on the 12-step program. And that 12-step program is totally connected to God. So you see, that's why they call working of the program a selfish program. Because the alcoholic and drug addict has to put their sobriety first above everything. And why? Because if they don't, they won't have anything. They can't be good fathers when they're drunk or high, good mothers, good sons and daughters, good parents. It requires them to be sober and clean in order to accomplish that. But see, a lot of us don't know that. A lot of us think that because doctors, or they call it medication, is given to us, that this is going to be a cure-all. This is the easier, softer way. So we form these wrong dependencies. These dependencies on self, I can do it, on our job, our relationship, pills, when we really need to place our dependency on God and the program, because we're able to face life with God and the program. Even the Big Book says that God is either everything or is nothing. There's a spiritual solution to any problem we have in life. If we find that spiritual solution, we'll get through it. But we run off looking for that easier, softer way when there is none. I'm just saying, give God and His program a chance to solve some of those life problems that you're experiencing. You know, years ago, I read a book by Ernest Becker called The Denial of Death. And he stated in this book that he felt that most mental illness was nothing more than an act of cowardice. He believed that depression and anxiety is a problem of courage. Cowardice develops in people who are scared of life, who can't face life on life's terms. They can't face life successfully. So they turn to easier, softer ways and choose mental illness as an escape from life, when in reality, they're not mentally ill. They're just cowards. They even convince themselves that they're unable to function because of their mental illnesses. No one seems to want to pay the price to be a hero, to stand up against the adversities of life and win, to be a hero, to do the right thing no matter how tough it is, instead of folding and running off and hiding in some medicated state of mind, something that keeps you from having to stand up and face life on life's terms. So alcoholics and drug addicts, they not only suffer from alcoholism and drug addiction, they also suffer from cowardice. They also suffer from false dependencies that don't work. And most of all, they continue to suffer from looking for an easier, softer way out of life's problems. But they're not alone in this insidious, destructive way of life. The treatment center suffers from the same cowardice that the alcoholic and drug addict does. You see, the alcohol and drug treatment centers, and the alcohol counselors for that matter, are between a rock and a hard place. What happened years ago, and I can remember this, is that a state agency went to the legislators and convinced them that they needed to regulate alcohol and drug treatment centers and also licensed counselors. The legislators passed laws giving these state employees the power to draw up regulations and to enforce those regulations. That's when the trouble started. The regulations they drew up reflected their own philosophical convictions. Therefore, any opposition to their opinions, also known as regulations, could land you in trouble. No matter how well-intentioned the counselor might be, his employer and the state will not allow him to dictate the quality of care for his client. They place requirements on this counselor, and he either has to obey or find another job. The regulators place these requirements on the treatment director, and they have to either obey or there's a real likelihood that their treatment center will be shut down. So the treatment centers, concerned with their own survival, become an employee of the state and an extension of the judicial system. Let me give you an example. At any given time, a probation officer can call a treatment center and tell them they need a UA on such and such probationer. The counselor will perform the UA, and after he gets the results, will report these back to the probation officer, which in turn, especially if they're negative, will report to the judge the results of the UA. So what does that create? Well, it creates a dishonest relationship between the client and the counselor. Even though this counselor can be the best there is, the most trustworthy counselor there is, that client does not feel he can totally trust that counselor because he knows that that counselor holds his freedom, his liberty, in his hands. He also knows that that counselor is going to write a letter to the probation officer or the judge telling the judge what kind of progress he's made or lack of progress and what to recommend to do with him after he's done with treatment. So it puts the relationship of the counselor and the client on a dishonest level. Nobody speaks about it, but that's the way it is. It's almost like a game-playing exercise that they're both involved in. And I wonder how much real help and benefit can come of that kind of relationship. So you can see the sick relationships that have formed that's destroyed or at least greatly reduced the quality of care for the alcoholic and drug addict. The main reason I continue to harp on this is because if you have went through treatment in one of these types of facilities, don't think for a moment that you've really received the high quality of care that you need to have in order to recover. And if you've had a loved one go through one of these types of facilities, make sure you check and make sure that person has had proper care. So many people are coming out of treatment thinking they got this thing when they don't even have the knowledge that it takes to make the first step in recovery. And you know what? Mental health knows they're failing. That's one of the reasons that they feel like they have to give the addict and alcoholic what they want. Because if they don't, they won't survive. Mental health pretends to treat them, and the addict pretends to be treated. As long as they insure the addict, maybe a small disability check, or these psychotropic medications, or whatever the case may be, a good letter for the probation officer, as long as they ensure these addicts will get what they want, these addicts will continue to come back to them, therefore making their own survival more secure. It's such a cowardly way to do business. This is not just a rant and rave theory. These are facts that I can prove. And we wonder why this epidemic of alcoholism and drug addiction is continuing to get worse. I feel that the majority of it lies in what I'm telling you right now. It's just a very corrupt and cowardly business at this point. You know, I hate to admit this, but I'm going to tell you the truth. I was so caught up into this mental health medication treatment that I seriously considered just becoming a mental health case so that the state could take care of me for the rest of my life. That they could either give me a little small check and let me live in an apartment or place me in a mental hospital. I was offered disability, but I didn't take it. But I almost did. I can remember the moment that I considered this. It was a willful decision that I was going to make. It had nothing to do with something that come over me or that I was too mentally ill to survive out on the streets. I was making a conscious, willful decision to claim mental illness in order to get taken care of and feel secure and away from the terrors of society. You see, I've always known the fear and terror of the world, even when I was a little kid. And I too became a coward because I was so terrified of life. I hid in a bottle and pills. And that's why, after all these repeated attempts at what these mental health people told me to do and my failure at them, I considered just living my life in an institution or a sub-living standard for the rest of my life. I look back on that and it saddens me because I know there's many, many, many people who are doing that. You ever watch those prison or lockup shows? Those prisoners are in there and they're all buffed up because they've been lifting weights and they talk about how they've been stabbing people and how bad their gangs are and all that. I think a lot of people think, wow, them people are really tough and courageous, but they're not. They're cowards. Underneath all that facade is a little coward who's scared to death to face life on life's terms, who don't want to get up in the morning and go to work every day so he can take care of his children. He's too cowardly to learn how to pay his bills, how to operate in this world. So he gets in trouble and he's sent back to the state penitentiary, and he can justify his cowardice and irresponsible behavior to both himself and family members by saying, what can I do? I'm in prison. Folks, these people are cowards. Why do you think the recidivism rate hovers around 60 to 64%? It's because prison really complements a cowardly way of living. It's their easier, softer way. He doesn't have any responsibilities. He doesn't have to pay his taxes. He doesn't have to go to work every day. He doesn't have to take care of his family. Doesn't have to pay his insurance, house payment, rent, car payment, any of that stuff. Just sits in there and watches TV, lifts weights, eats. It's not the best place to be, but it's worth it to avoid the terrors and strains of life. You know, one time when I was in psychology class in college, they were discussing this experiment where they were trying to teach monkeys colors. And when the monkey would get the color right, they'd reward him. And when they get it wrong, they'd punish him. Now, how they punished him is they put the monkey in a timeout room. It was just a square concrete room, and the monkey had to stay in there for a period of time till he learned his lesson. Well, what they found out is that this monkey was making more mistakes the more they punished him. In other words, when they put him in a timeout room, his mistakes increased. They finally figured out what it was. This monkey loved the timeout room. Yeah, he loved the timeout room. He made mistakes so he could go to the timeout room. And that's what I feel that a lot of, if not the majority of, convicts in prison are. They're that monkey that loves the timeout room. Alcoholics and drug addicts, people on disability. And please, don't think for a minute that I'm classifying all people that's on disability as cowards, because I'm not. I know there's people that need to be on that. I've had family members on that. I totally understand the reason for disability. The people I'm talking about are the cowards who are shrinking from their responsibility, who are using the system as a way of avoiding life and the responsibilities that go along with living. I mean, they're all in the same category, the same boat. Cowards. They can't or won't deal with life on life's terms. And of course, mental health diagnoses them with a mental illness. My gosh, can things get any more crazy? I don't think so. It's like the blind leading the blind, but it's the cowards leading the cowards. Check this out. Around the mid to the late 1980s, insurance companies, at least here in the state of Kansas, was mandated to pay for alcohol and drug treatment. Well, the companies, the aircraft mostly here in Wichita, got upset about this because it was being abused. I know one hospital that was treating people for a 30-day stay charged over $900 worth of vitamins to this patient's insurance company. So the insurance company did have some legitimate reasons for being upset. So what they did is stop paying for alcohol and drug treatment. Well, when that happened, the treatment centers realized that the insurance companies would pay for a mental health diagnosis. So when they got an alcoholic or a drug addict into treatment, they would just give them a mental health diagnosis plus alcoholism or drug addiction diagnosis. That way the insurance companies would pay for it. And that's where dual diagnoses started. And it's only gotten worse since then. I remember when I first came to Wichita that I worked at a mental health center. And we'd go over every case in the mornings of people who had been committed to the psych unit in the hospital. And there was this one pretty well-known psychiatrist that was also working there that was at these morning meetings. And he said, "Hey, Bill, we got a schizophrenic here." And I said, "How's that?" And he said, "Well, this guy came home late at night, kicked in his mother's door, started smashing her furniture, hollering, 'Kill, kill,' and just acted totally bizarre and crazy. So the police took him to the psych unit at one of the hospitals here, and the next day, this guy seemed to be totally normal when the psychiatrist saw him. So there's no doubt he's a schizophrenic." I said, "No, he's not. I bet he's an alcoholic who was in a blackout, and after he got detoxed in the psych unit, he went back to normal." Well, look at that. That psychiatrist could have diagnosed that guy as a schizophrenic and treated him as such. But I was right. After further investigation, this guy was an alcoholic. So you see, if you have a diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, you really need to question that, because a lot of times it's just to make money, or the people don't know what they're doing when they're diagnosing alcoholics and drug addicts with these type of diagnoses. I've had people come to me that were under a doctor's care and was taking medication for a diagnosis of anxiety when the diagnosis was made when they was under the influence of meth. I've also had people come to me that were taking antidepressants because they had a diagnosis of depression while they was coming off of meth. I mean, these are both common ailments as they're going through their withdrawals or using drugs. I think a person ought to be off of all drugs for at least 6 to 8 weeks before they even check them out. It's just ridiculous. You know, there's so much of that going on nowadays. I can only conclude that either people in America, especially here in Kansas, are getting more mentally ill, or mental health is not doing their job. They're not getting people well. I mean, it's got to be one or the other. because things are getting worse. Either we're getting more mentally ill or mental health's not doing their job. That's why it scares me and saddens me so much that I almost made a decision to become a mental case so they could take care of me for the rest of my life. The things they were telling me to do to straighten my life out failed, but I didn't know what they were telling me was wrong. I thought I was a failure. It would have been so sad if I'd have made that decision. I wouldn't have the family I have today. My kids wouldn't be here and my grandkids. I would have never had my alcohol and drug treatment center. My purpose in life would have been unfulfilled. It would have been like a racer had went in and just erased it. Thank God for this program. Because see, everything I have today, I owe to God and the 12-step program. Everything. My own life, every breath I take. I would have been dead long before now. I could have never got well with mental health counseling because you see, psychology are mental concepts. They're just mental concepts they give you. But the 12-step program are experiences that the person has to live. When they have to get rid of a resentment, there's a method that AA teaches you to do that. That's not a mental concept. You have to do it. The way to get rid of a resentment is to pray for that person every day and ask God to give them what you want in your life. That's not a mental concept. That's an experience that has to be lived. They have to do that. Thank God I had people that went before me so they could share their experiences with me, that they could teach me how to live life on life's terms, because they've done it, because they've been where I'm at, coward, and now they're a hero. They come out the other end and succeeded. And you know what? They're willing to teach you how to do it. And then when they teach me, I teach others, and others teach others. And they also taught me how to be my true self, who I really was. And the first step on that journey, on discovering who I really was, started when I walked up to that podium and I said, my name's Bill, and I'm an alcoholic. Because you see, my name is Bill. And what am I? I'm an alcoholic. I know that a lot of you think the 12-step program is tough, and mental health and medication is an easier, softer way. But I can assure you that all the hard work you put into the program, every teeny little bit will be worth it. So we need to be a hero. We need to stand our ground. We need to believe that God is everything. We have a program that has the answer to any problem we experience in life. Folks, we really do. You have a decision to either be a hero or be a coward. Cowards take the easier, softer way. Heroes take the right road, even in the face of terrifying fear. If they lack courage, they know where to go to get it. Doesn't our serenity prayer say, God grant me the courage? This doesn't mean you're not going to have fear. It doesn't mean you're not going to have terror in your life. But it means to be strong and be a hero and stand there in the middle of that terror and fear and do it anyway, because you can. We have a God and a 12-step program and people around us, sponsors, and other people that we've made friends with in the meetings that can see us through this. If you're just beginning on your journey of sobriety, or maybe you've been in it for years, you're faced with this decision that it's either the 12-step program or an easier, softer way. It's an either-or decision, folks. There's no third choice. You can't have a little bit of each one of those. You can't have a little bit of 12-step program and a little bit of medication and mental health. You can't do that. This is an either-or decision that you have to make. So it's a matter of where you're going to put your faith. I didn't say belief. I said faith. A lot of us believe, or we say we do. A lot of us say we believe in God and the 12-step program, but sometimes our behavior doesn't show it. We say we believe, but we put our faith in other things, into the medication, the pills, relationships, sex, all that stuff, when in fact our dependency or where we should put our faith is in God. You might say to me, Bill, I'll show you my faith by my beliefs. You know what I'd say to that? I'd say, oh no, you're not getting off with that cowardly statement. That is a cowardly illusion that keeps you where you're at. You need to turn that statement around. I would say to you that I can show you my beliefs by my faith. You think you can show me your faith by your beliefs? I'll show you my beliefs by my faith. It's like a person standing beside the edge of a cliff And he says, I believe God will catch me if I jump off here. I believe that. And so he sets up a podium and starts preaching about how great his faith is because of what he believes. And he has thousands of people listening to him from this podium. But you want to know what? If you watch him, you'll never see him jump. He'll just talk about jumping. He'll say, I would jump. I could jump. I'm sure to jump. But you never see him jump. He will talk about people who have jumped. He'll read stories to you about people that's jumped. But you'll never see him jump. He tries to drag faith over to belief so close that the people can't determine which is which. They're clouded. People, faith is the jump. When that person is standing at the edge of the cliff, the moment he raises his foot and goes off that cliff, that's faith. Everything before then is not faith. So if you're one of the ones that's standing at the side of that cliff, knowing that you have to make a decision to either stay there or jump, and if you stay there, you're surrendering to the medications, to the mental health, psychotherapy, other faulty, illusionary dependencies, what you think is the easier, softer way, or you're going to jump into the arms of God and the 12-step program. That decision's yours. You know what I'd tell you? Jump.
Thanks for listening to The Recovery Effect with Bill Vineyard. Check out more at therecoveryeffect.com and facebook.com/therecoveryeffect. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes.